Alright, today I'm going to talk about why... Well, I'm just going to talk about, like, the differences between vines and arrows and why one of them is balanced and one of them is not. So I've been thinking of making a series for a while now about where I just go over exactly why a bunch of cards are overpowered. Because, I mean, just knowing it makes it a little bit easier to cope with, you know? So, just to begin with, let's look at arrows, right? So arrows, it has a bunch of different use cases. It has a worst case scenario where if you're hitting a lone tank, it's not very much value. Like, if you arrows a knight, that's 3 for 3, not very good. Also has a neutral case. You arrows archers alone, 3 for 3, you just exactly cancel out your elixir. But you also have a positive case, and your positive case is where you hit archers and a knight, for example. So even though the arrows isn't good value on the knight alone, since you already killed the archers, it's already 3 for 3, and then you get free damage on the knight. So the arrows gets you extra value when it hits extra units. So the arrows has its whole thing. It does low damage, but it can hit a lot of units, and the more units it hits, the more value it gets. It's pretty mid and early game, but it still does its use. It still does its role. It doesn't do things that aren't in its role, but it does its one role. And then later on in the game, it starts to get more and more value, and it deters people from grouping up units. Right? So arrows is a balanced card because it has good cases, it has bad cases. The good cases cannot be forced, and the bad cases can be you can just not play your arrows in the bad case. Now let's look at vines. How do vines work? Vines also get value by dealing damage, just like the arrows. They can go 3 for 3 like with archers. But that's not all they can do. It also does more damage than arrows, which is fun. It also stuns. How fun. So because of the extra damage and the stun, it doesn't have a bad case into like a lone knight anymore. If you arrows a lone knight, it's not going to work very well. But if you vines a lone knight, it does work pretty well. So the vines has one less bad case scenario than the arrows does, because if you just vines a lone high value unit, then it's a whole lot of value. Arrowsing a lone high value unit just doesn't work. So vines does have one less bad case scenario. But then we consider rangers. It's also really good into rangers, because since it does more damage than arrows does, that means that it's really good at dealing with like half of the health of a ranger. And on top of dealing like half the health of a ranger, it also stuns that ranger. So it's good value into a lone ranger, it's good value into a lone tank. But of course, then we have to go, well, this card's so good against small numbers of units, let's make it bad into large numbers of units, alright? So now, if I vines guards, oh, it still killed the guards. Like, so they made a card that's good into small number of units and bad into large numbers of units. And then they just said, let's make it good into swarms too. So it still kills skellies, still kills guards, all the nonsense. So like, it's just kind of crazy, right? So, alright, fine. Maybe it can kill small swarms and also gets really good value into units and also gets too much. Alright, I didn't even talk about its best case scenario. Its best case scenario is when it's hitting 3 big units, right? So arrows gets value by hitting lots of units, big or small. Vines gets value by hitting units, big or small, but it gets its entire value, its maximum value on just 3 units. And that's the biggest problem here, because 3 units can happen in single time. There is no point in the game where Vine's best value can't happen. And you can kind of make it happen by just forcing somebody to defend, because when they defend, they play the units. And when they play the units, it's physically impossible to not give the Vine spell value, because if there's 1 unit, it's already spell value. Just tower alone, that's 2.5 stun, that's 2.5 seconds stun on the tower. So it's already value on the tower. But it's on top of that, it's just so easy for it to get value just hitting 2 units. If I play a musketeer, there's a Valk coming down the lane and I want to protect my musketeer from the Valk. I play a knight in front of my musketeer, and then that was a mistake. The knight was a mistake. I played the right play where I block the Valk from hitting my musketeer, and that was the wrong play because the knight is just giving him Vine's value. Half kill the musketeer, deal a lot of damage to the knight, stun both of the units, and allow the Valk to go to town while the stun is happening. So it gets value from the stun, value from the damage, and it gets more value hitting more units on top as a card that's not supposed to get value hitting more units. So like, the use cases, right? The worst case is that it hits a swarm. Like Vines a Skarmy, not great value. You just don't Vines a Skarmy. Like, its worst case scenario is user error, because it acts like a lightning, right? I'm sure you remember this. Vines goes for the highest health unit in range. You know lightning, right? It's hard to lightning block. Even though it's 6 elixir, it's just hard to find cards that are that high health. So Vines is something that you have to lightning block for half of the cost. They gave it a counterplay that you cannot counterplay. Like, you know how much elixir you normally have to spend to lightning block something? That's a lot of elixir, especially considering it's half the price of lightning. which is just absurd. There's just so many good cases for the card for it to not have any counterplay. Like realistically, if there's a Valk coming down the lane at your Musketeer, you could Knight Far from your Musketeer. It's just the fact that you have to take that much space to deal with the threat of them possibly playing a card means that it's just too good value. And that is probably the worst part, actually. It's too good value, and that's not even the gimmick of the card. The damage alone is really good. So you realistically just take away the stun, take away the grounding, and now it's still a solid card, just because of the fact maybe it only hits 3 units, but it still hits harder than arrows, so it still full kills guards. I mean, like, if you gave it its damage back. But, like, a unit that a spell that full kills guards would be a good spell. Just a 3 elixir full kill to guards, that's a good spell alone. But it also has stun. So on top of being on top of being able to fully pay itself off with the damage alone, it can fully pay itself off with the stun alone. And there's another worstest part. And the worst part is that it also grounds things. The entire point of Vines is that it's supposed to pull air units to the ground and make them stop moving. So it can pay itself off fully with the damage, pay itself off fully again with the stun, and pay itself off fully by being an anti-air. Right? How is that okay? They made a card that has like an interesting niche, and then they just gave it the stats of avoid freeze delivery arrows. What? But let's consider this. Let's imagine for a moment they balanced Vines, okay? So let's just say they nerf the damage by a lot, so now it does the same damage as arrows, and it hits more units than arrows, but it doesn't have as strong a stun as Freeze or Hunter Net. So now what it does is it grounds things and it stops them from moving, but the things can still attack. So now you have, but in return, it can hit many more units. So now, well, maybe it should do log damage instead of arrows damage if it can hit that many units. But now what it does is it's good at grounding air, which is its exact purpose. It hits many units, it grounds the entire air push on the ground, holds them there for a while longer than it does right now, but in return, it's not just a freeze. It doesn't get its value by killing things. It doesn't get its value killing a bunch of things. It doesn't get its value by freezing a bunch of things. It holds things in place, but they can still attack. And its main purpose at this point would be to pull things to the ground. All right? So this is a way that the Vines could theoretically be balanced. But I'm still talking about it negatively. Why am I still talking about it negatively? Think about the deck design. If I design a deck around Vines, how do I do it, right? So Vines is a card that brings air cards down to the ground and makes them ground cards. So in order to properly design around that synergy, right, I have a deck building series, in order to properly design around that synergy of Vines pulling things to the ground, then you need to have an all-ground deck. So you just play a deck that has no anti-air and just utterly steamroll the ground. So, like, go all out. P.E.K.K.A Mega Knight Sparky nonsense. But, like, and then if you see an iDrag, just vines it to the ground. If you see a Lava Hound, vines it to the ground. Loon, vines it. So you can play a deck that has no anti-air except for the vines and just steamroll through the ground, all right? So that is a theoretical way that Vines could be balanced. You could design a deck around it. It would be its own niche. Everything is good, except for the fact that that's not good, because that's not a healthy niche for the game. If we're allowed to make a deck that has no anti-air and literally just Vines, that's not good. That's not good for deck design. That's too good of a card. Its role would be too strong. Like, in 2.6 Hog Rider, you have the Musketeer as your main anti-air, but you also have a building to pull a Loon or Ice Golem to tank and Fireball to deal knockback. So Musketeer has help, and it's still barely enough because you need to cycle multiple Musketeers per defense. So having just one spell that can act as your entire anti-air for the deck and just go with ground synergy from then on is not healthy for the game. Because if you can build... So, like, how we're operating off this is, right, we're assuming that since we're doing ground steamroll is going to be able to break through an offense in return for not needing to waste a card on anti-air. And the Vines will help out with that. But if ground steamroll is undefendable, that's just broken. So, like, you can't have Vines enable a broken deck just by the sheer concept of the card. So, like, we're still assuming that we're going with my proposed balance changes where you make Vines its own niche, where it's specifically an anti-air spell. But, like, even if you do make it a specifically anti-air spell, it enables a niche that is not healthy for the game. Because if ground all in is undefendable, it's just the best deck in the game because it's undefendable. And if it is defendable, then why would anybody bother using it? Because it's just defendable. So like Vines is broken right now because it can pay itself off with its damage, it can pay itself off with a stun, and it can pay itself off with the anti-air. So let's say it doesn't do that much damage, and the stun doesn't actually stop units from attacking, and it's good anti-air now. So let's just lean into the one thing that it's good at, or should be good at. Even when it's doing the only thing it should be good at, it's still not good for the game. That's just crazy. Like, honestly, I don't think Vines should exist. Anyway, on that note, I'm planning to make a lot more of these episodes, so feel free to pick a card from the 2 slides that I've got right here. I'm quote-unquote slides. There are a lot of cards that are too good or just bad or just broken in some way. So I want to talk about all of these cards in their own video. So I've got 8 cards here and 6 more on this side. So every single one of these cards I think needs a really big change before they can be normal for the game again, or even just straight up vaulted, honestly. But yeah, please comment on a card from these 2 so I know what to make, or if not, I'll probably just like do Empress or something like that. But yeah, see you guys next time.